Hello. So before a Twitch stream, I was talking to ex-Milky Bar kid Stuart Ashens, and he said,
"Hey, I've got this magazine nobody's scanned. Would you like it?"
In fact, it was a magazine that Stuart himself had been obsessed with, but he suspected most hadn't heard of.
Let's find out, because now someone has scanned it and he is Ashens. And here, for possibly the first time in about 30 years, it is. Public Domain Magazine, Issue 1. It's November and or December 1991, and this is an incredibly cost-effective Yesterzine. This is something that's going to need an explanation of concept. In short, public domain software is an old name for free software, so you can copy and send it to whomever you like without any problems at all. Or of course, start a magazine for which compiling the cover disk would be a very cheap business, and in late 1991 Future decided to do just that. And then proceeded to make compiling the cover disk expensive again with the brave but complex decision to mount a disk that could work on ST, Amiga and DOS PCs. We'll explain how the bloody hell they pulled that one off with the help of Rob Smith. We'll steal a format from Gouldfish on Games and do the first ever single disc but also multiple format cover disk face-off. We'll discover the PD pioneers who became an international software powerhouse, when PD was not PD, and we'll even look at what connects this magazine and this show. But first, let's hear a little bit more about this public domain lark. Because in the news section, apparently some people are playing fast and loose with it. Atari's legal team has been mobilised to defend their paint package Neochrome, Atari being adamant they would not hesitate in taking action. You can see the point in Neochrome's case. The first two releases had been freely distributable, and you could believe some distributors might not realise later ones weren't. Whoever it was who hacked and renamed it, they probably should know. Perhaps they're letting Neochrome go because there's bigger fish to fry, specifically the game Joust, which Atari was still shopping around the budget software providers. Seeing that being openly advertised as copyright free probably hurts. Credibly, this hasn't dented their commitment to the concept of free software, or made them go after those making legally distinct clones. Clones that would likely be a lot more fun than Derek Doran, a man suspiciously sharing initials with Kickoff creator Dino Dini, trying to get people interested in discs of Kickoff 2 replays. It's a bizarre idea. But then virtually everyone watching this probably spends entirely too much time on YouTube in 2025 watching someone else play games. So maybe I'll stop here before doing irreparable damage to my glass house. Codemasters are releasing Fantasy World Dizzy as PD, except they're not, because in order to play it for more than 5, 15, 30 and 60 minutes, you need to phone a premium rate number to exchange secret codes. David Darling being quoted as not being ashamed of charging for the game, and that's fair enough, but don't then claim you released it as PD. Also, never make me phone anyone. Also, never make me phone someone 4 times in a single hour. You could be the best game ever and I'm still going off to play Jet Set Willy again instead. In fact, stick with me, because even without those phone calls, it's still not public domain. And in fact, the news section is full of weird terms. GFA Basic is licenseware, for example, and Acore claims to be a supplier of shareware. And I think we're going to have to take a break from magazine-related matters at this point to explain what the heck any of those terms mean. Because this one is a little tricky. There's several billion licensing models in the world, especially in the internet age. Yesterzine uses a lot of them. The show itself is free to you, but YouTube will either show you more ads than you would think conceivably possible, or charge you for a music service that also comes with high-quality magazine-based videos.
Not this one, obviously, but there's got to be a couple out there.
But also our title theme is by a man called Bjorn Lynne, and more of him later. I am allowed to use it in as many YouTube videos as I like without paying him anything, because I've already paid him an entirely reasonable amount for a lifetime license. But if you were to use it, you're going to get struck harder than a worm being hit by an exploding sheep. This is a cleverer joke than you think. Some pictures and video have come from the YouTuber's secret favourite site Pexels, and for those they're generally under an attribution license. I, or indeed you, can use them all we like, but I need to tell you who really made them, and that's partly what the credits are for at the end of each episode. For instance, this lovely footage I once claimed was Swindon is a garbage dump flyover by Tom Fisk. You'll see his name in the credits of episode 76. And now I've used it again, this episode. For years now, you'll have seen these lovely images of various retro systems popping up in videos. These are also the ones on Wikipedia, and they're by Evan Amos of Vanamo Media. They are true public domain. As Wikipedia's own note says,
I grant anyone the right to use this work for any purpose, without any conditions, unless said conditions are required by law.
I also attribute these because they are tremendous work, but I don't have to. Legally speaking, I believe I can even claim I made them. I can produce a barely transformative work and release that. I can print them out and frame them.
I would do one of these things.
But when we talk about PD in the Amiga era, Public Domain magazine are presenting it as the true PD version.
You're free to pass on PD software to your friends or enemies without fear of infringing copyright laws because there is no copyright.
The distinction is important. Yesterzine is free, but it is still copyrighted. You cannot legally distribute this show, not least because, as mentioned, you don't have the right to distribute 12th Warrior, and I cannot give you that right. So for you to release something true PD, anything you use also needs to be true PD, which is why these days there's not much of it. Almost any media you get now stands on the shoulders of one or more giants and has support from other people's work, with rights similar to that of the music from Audio Hero I'm using in the background right now. No sub-licensing. Starting to realise why lawyers earn more than either of us? It's a complex business, media licensing, and even Public Domain magazine clearly don't fully understand it. Because having said there's no copyright and no distribution conditions, they then immediately define some distribution conditions. We're not quite pre-World Wide Web here, but this magazine was published during October 1991. The UK, as a country, has only had internet access for 3 months. You can see the runtime of this episode. We probably don't have time for here's how the internet came to be. Thankfully, me old mate John already did it, so head for the description after this and learn some things. Bulletin boards existed, of course. These were effectively pre-website websites. You dialed the phone number of the site directly, and you connected to a little front end where you could ask the computer there to do things for you. It might have news pages, for instance, or even a message board. Or you might be able to download software, very slowly. But then most of these programs are also very small, so that works out. Public Domain magazine is ahead of the game here. There's an entire article on using your modem to download free software. It makes sense, because if you have a modem in 1991, that would have cost all your money, and so you couldn't afford commercial software anymore. Thinking about it, given they usually wouldn't be local calls, the time taken to download a disc would probably cost more than ordering it anyway. And you'd need to buy a disc. This is if you could even find a modem. I can't find one advertised in this entire issue, but TriLogic will sell you a lead for the modem they wouldn't sell you. While no one selling modems felt the need to advertise in this magazine that showed you how to use a modem, someone is selling Mega Drives for some reason. I guess if you're getting all your MIGI software for free, you've the money left over to pay for Fire Mustang, which I just thought was the most common phrase on a Ford warranty claim. I thought I'd grab a price reference from that month's 260-page Amiga format magazine. It takes until page 176 for someone to advertise a modem at all. Supra's 2400 board base model would download an Amiga disc in a mere hour or so for just £150. The latest 9600 models that could do it in 15 minutes would set you back a mere £400. And bear in mind those prices are roughly 2.5 times that now with inflation. So what most people used were what was called PD libraries. These were simply mail order companies. You phoned up and almost universally you ordered from the list of discs they had at a price per disc. You would generally be charged for the blank disc, a small amount for the time to copy the disc, and of course postage, which libraries figured out in various ways. Unsurprisingly, this magazine has a lot of adverts for them, so let's pick one at random. This is Mega Blitz, and their advert is a giant list of enthralling Amiga titles, some or none of which you might have heard of beforehand. Who knows what the hell Dynamite Dick is, for instance, but I bet your mum ordered a copy. This is of course why this magazine exists, and most magazines had at least some form of PD section, but that's only going to cover a small portion of what's available. One partial solution to this were catalogue discs, and Mega Blitz will preemptively send you one free with any order. which is of course another cost they'll need to take into account. Taking advantage of the copyright-free nature, another solution was compilation discs. Most software didn't take up all the space, so groups like the Ashens would put multiple games and programs they felt were cool onto single discs which were themselves distributed. Mega Blitz have homebrewed up a few of their own, including the interesting idea of making their own office suite by grouping 8 unnamed and possibly completely unrelated productivity-like packages. I'm guessing they didn't use names so they could use whichever one they thought best at the time. Their prices though are a reasonable indication of how things were. In a world where a commercial game was £20 to £25 and a budget game maybe £8, then Mega Blitz would charge you £1 a disc if you ordered at least 20, with smaller orders trending upwards to where a single disc would be £2.50 delivered. For the price of a new game, you could have a bountiful pile of stuff. I certainly did. My one big order from a PD library was the first 28 Ashens discs. I was set for a very long time, and not just because Ashens Disc 3 includes still the best breakout Arkanoid ever in Mega Ball. If you have Amiga Forever, it's included in that if you want to prove my indisputable correctness as always. Where does Mega Blitz make money in this, you reasonably ask, and the answer is, in general, they don't. They're covering their discs, postage, those catalogue discs, and of course whatever future charged for adverts at the time, but that's it. I mentioned that Public Domain magazine assigned restrictions to distribution, and this is it.
PD libraries are not allowed to sell you software, and indeed they don't. The money they charge is a fee for copying their programs onto the disk for you, not for the actual program itself. Nor are they supposed to profit from distributing public domain software.
Then again, they also say,
any money left over goes straight back into the library's resources.
Which sounds a lot like profit to me, but hey ho. Either way, the way I read PD software is you absolutely can make a profit if you like. No restrictions on distribution means no restrictions on distribution, surely. Your hobbyist YouTubers feel the next question though, which is, well, why do they do it then? And in this respect, we're referring to the software authors rather than the libraries. Why do they spend hours creating something they give away for free? I don't know, says your host working on episode 81 of a mildly successful YouTube show, which, while monetized to make YouTube promote it at all, carries an hourly rate that compares unfavourably to foraging in the nearest stream for bottle caps. And ultimately, the answer is the same: the love of the craft and the hobby. I like to write. It's not like the other stuff is unfun, but Yesterzine for me is about the script writing. Unfortunately, no one reads web pages and blogs now. This is how you get anything resembling an audience in 2025. So now you have to hear my voice. I'm sorry. As PD Magazine puts it,
something that's theirs. Something they've created. Something that they're proud of. And if you've created something like that, why not share it?
And they point out not everything is going to make enough money to be worth it. I'd have got absolutely nowhere selling Yesterzine on DVD for £10 a time, and what's the point if no one is watching, like and subscribe? PD Magazine's examples involve drivers to keep discontinued hardware alive. Useful, but not a moneymaker. The evidence here being that if the hardware was popular enough for it to be a moneymaker, then the hardware would probably not have been discontinued in the first place. They also suggest games that are not good enough to be commercial, although that never seemed to stop tier techs, and stuff that would never sell for 30 quid, like a horoscope program. I'm not even going to check, but I am absolutely certain someone has at some point sold a horoscope program for 30 quid. We're now back to software licensing, because the question is, when is PD not PD? And it's interesting how some of these concepts have endured and some haven't. Because the majority of free software these days is probably closer to freeware, which is where the English language breaks down, because copyright doesn't mean you can't copy it. Freeware is absolutely free to copy and distribute, but copyright, or to use a more modern useful term, intellectual property, remains. You cannot alter freeware. You can't profit from it unless the author says you can. You can't incorporate it into another program, so an Assassin-style disk might be dodgy, and it must be distributed with its documentation. As PD Magazine points out, an author may choose their rights, and these days the Creative Commons rules that require me to credit Tom Fisk are a good analogy. I get certain rights with Tom's stuff, as long as I tell you I used it, but I do have to make sure YouTube use is okay. and if somehow there ever is a Yesterzine Blu-ray box set, I've got a lot of checking of individual clips to do. Then you get to shareware, and this one is easy to explain. It's WinRAR. You get given the software. If you like it, you send some cash to the author. But you don't, do you? You use WinRAR for free for 30 years. You send Eugene and Alexander Rochel absolutely nothing, but make memes mocking them on the internet.
You're a horrible person and you should be ashamed of yourself. Look at his little face. You disgust me.
But that is how most shareware worked. You got the full thing immediately, and in this era where the computers rarely had hard disks and didn't always have internal clocks, you didn't even have a time limit. All you got for sending the cash was the feeling of being legal, and presumably half a chance of a new version ever appearing. Other common forms at the time included charityware, which is shareware but they asked you to donate to a charity, giftware, which was shareware minus the legal obligation to donate, think like a Ko-fi account, and licenseware, which was just commercial software but sold through PD libraries for cheap. That last one is the only one where you weren't allowed to pass on the disc or copies of it to anyone you choose. Or indeed, order a library's entire range and set up one yourself, which is presumably how most of them got started. Or at least they listed stuff they didn't have and ordered it from another library the first time someone requested it. But what kind of stuff could you actually get from PD libraries? Well, luckily we have a very easy answer to this, because in a no-brainer of a decision, Public Domain Magazine is going to have a cover disc. The problem they have is the magazine covers the Amiga, the ST and the PC. Software for none of those is going to work on the other. So what to do? Pick a format and piss off the other two sets of users? Mount 3 discs and risk most people never touching 2 of them even though they paid for them? Or do something really stupid like try to invent a way of making a single disc that would work on all 3 machines, and make it smart enough all 3 machines treated it like any other single format native disc. That of course would result in a huge amount of complexity, only 1/3 of a disk of space for each computer, and completely wipe out the cost benefits of all the actual contents of that disk being free. So of course that's what they did. Luckily I have a secret weapon here. Upstanding human Rob Smith, who looked into how this would even be possible.
The Atari ST and the PC both use the same file system on floppy disks, FAT12. The dual format disks couldn't be read by the PC, probably because they were using 10 sectors per track rather than the standard 9. My guess is the Atari ST and the PC will both share the same file system, i.e. the same folders and files, but maybe each one has its own folder. However, I suspect that all of the content for the Atari ST will be on the lower side of the disk and the PC the upper. Dividing that 3 ways, I guess the Amiga content will consume the rest, assuming it gets 2 sectors on track 0 and some on track 40. So, let's have a look. Once again, starting with Disk Flashback, that's always had support for dual format disks, you can see it's detected 2 file systems and made a drive for each. One for the Amiga, which looks exactly like it should. It claims to be a standard OFS disk, but as suspected, the files on the disk only actually take up 282K of physical space. That's about 1/3 of the disk. Onto the PC and Atari side. It does indeed contain 2 folders, one labelled PC and the other ST. The entire disk this time claims to be about the right size for a double density FAT12 disk. And even if the Atari ST only had a single-sided drive, the operating system would still know about double-sided disks. And looking at the total usage for the Atari ST side, we see it's using 154K, whereas the PC folder is using 248K. Not really an even split, but maybe that was tailored to the content being added.
And that's just the basics. Rob's video on both this and the double format discs are well worth watching, as to be fair is his entire channel. I mean, where else are you going to learn how to build an actual alien motion tracker? Speaking of channels worth watching, Gouldfish on Games has been running what I affectionately refer to as Yesterzine's unofficial sister for 5 years now. Coverdisk Faceoff takes the Amiga magazines from a month in history and plays all their cover discs to discover which was the best value that month, which gives me the opportunity for the first ever unofficial multi-machine, but single disc, Coverdisk Faceoff. And we'll start, as the magazine does, with the Amiga, where there is a game and 2 exciting utilities. Let's deal with those utilities, because I'm going to struggle to jazz this one up sufficiently for entertaining hashtag content. We've got a utility that generates calendars in a format you can import into some Amiga productivity software, which I don't have, or print on the printer I do not own. To be fair, this is perfect PD. Nothing anyone is paying for, but could be useful to a certain section of society. We've also got a calculator, but quite a clever one. This one starts and then gets out of your way, and then is called up by a keystroke whenever you need it. Obvious in the modern world, but potentially very useful in that world. For a freebie on a magazine, perfectly nice stuff. Anyway, enough of this bullcrap. A game. We're going route 1 on this. It's a car game called Car. It doesn't have any racing, so this is purely a time trial game. It's a decent amount of content for a small one though. There's 10 tracks in this thing, all of which you can do 5 laps runs in. And in doing so, you'll discover there's some decent handling here, especially on the tracks with multiple surfaces. The car slides about progressively in a way that not every commercial game from this early in the life of the machine could manage. It was one of the problems Andrew Graham described in making the original Micro Machines, which was released this same year. There's a couple of pieces of weirdness. The car will only accelerate or brake if you're holding down fire when you try, which I guess means you don't do it accidentally when you're cornering if you have a dodgy joystick. More weirdly, the game doesn't give you any times during or even after the game, but gives you a score which is presumably some function of the total time. Or isn't. It might just be vibes, there's no way to tell. More remarkably, for a game made in 1991, PD or otherwise, Car has full replays. Once you put your high score in, it'll play your entire run back to you seemingly perfectly. That's something that wouldn't be ubiquitous even in commercial games for about another half decade. For a free title to manage it is good going, especially a title which, if you boot the disc directly, runs on a 512KB machine. Good going in general, in fact. This is a strong start for a little free game. There's a few as entertainment here, although I'd certainly have preferred it giving me actual times for comparison. 10 tracks and some decent physics though, a strong little freebie. I'm actually surprised the author didn't do anything commercial as far as I can see. Their only known other credit is another PD game called Mini Blast. The Amiga has laid down a marker here. And it's a marker we were very nearly stuck with, because it was at this point it occurred to me that the strictly Amiga format disk image I had wouldn't work on other formats. Luckily, after a panicked conversation with Ashens, we found the second rip on archive.org in many formats. Which is lucky, because my first plan to search for the games by name elsewhere is going to struggle with our ST offering Tennis, about one stage removed from it just being called Game, and I'm saying that having just come from a game called Car. On the face of it, Tennis is a weird choice too. It carries a copyright date of 1986, some 5 years before this disc. The world of PD moves quick. There must have been innumerable other options. Getting into a match, you start to understand it. It immediately gives the impression of being incredibly high quality for something given away free, especially in a world that at the time of its coding did not yet have the Amiga 500. The impression lasts until you play it. It all works just about as you would expect at first. You serve and it's almost too easy for it to stay in. But then the other guy returns the ball and you realise your player moves about as fluidly as the guy in Quap. There's a weird inertia to him, and if you even tap the key he'll keep moving right across the entire court. Attempting to turn around results in a slower turning circle than a full-size cruise ship, and he doesn't appear to be able to hit the ball until he does. You can adjust to a degree, and in 2-player where both players would be subject to these restrictions, there's a game to be had here. It's uncommonly good for a freebie even 5 years later.
Have I done enough foreshadowing yet?
Because the shenanigans alarm is going off, and the very sharp-eyed of you with an interest in less popular consoles have spotted it. Because here's Tournament Tennis on ColecoVision. Slightly familiar, isn't it? As might be considered this, Scion's Match Point for CPC. Those games were all written by D&L Research for their respective publishers. And if we take a look at the title screen, here you get the proof, albeit minus an and. The 3 authors can also be cross-referenced, and they are indeed credited with the commercial release of the game for ST by Microbyte in the US and France Image Logiciel in presumably France. It's not like this is an obscure game. The 8-bit versions appeared on iterations of They Sold a Million, which certainly implies a certain level of sales on those platforms. Surely Public Domain magazine wouldn't have blindly bunged a commercial release on the disc without checking. They're not Italian. The blurb on the magazine though makes absolutely no reference to its paid-for software past. My only assumption here is that the ST version never got a UK release, D&L retained the rights and decided to just release it for free, since by 1991 no one is going to pay them for a 5-year-old game that had been bettered several thousand times. And that was backed up by a conversation with the fragrant Cogweasel from Gears of Games, who pointed out it had also been mounted a year earlier by Stampede. We'll be looking at that in more detail another time, because Stampede is interesting. It only had 16 pages but hid an entire magazine worth of text on its 2 discs, as well as a full commercial game. Tennis, though, is hidden away simply in an August PD folder on disc 2 of issue 4. The Stampede version curiously missing the copyright notice that's in the PD magazine copy. The lawyers attracted by the last game might as well hang around too, because we swap to the PC side and it's time for another episode of Legally Distinct Corner. Frack is Tetris. But it's Tetris with a twist. Frack is played on a 3D board and the pieces are simpler than they are in the real game, which is lucky because instead of lines you have to fill an entire layer of the board. As a general rule, taking a simple game and making it more complex is a dangerous business. There's any number of official sequels to Tetris that would testify to that. Tetris 2 on NES uses exactly the same pieces but asks you to match colours, as in columns and the like. This probably seemed like a great idea until they took Tetris's greatest format, the Game Boy, and attempted to do it on that as Tetris Flash. Frack 2 suffers. It's obviously very difficult to see how near the camera your piece is, so the game helps you out by marking the top of each wall with where you're currently located. Why they didn't do the entire column though is beyond me, because following those marks down and working out where your piece is going to land is essentially impossible to do in time, especially once there's some stuff in play. Rotation is still on one button, but your piece can rotate in a bunch of extra ways, to be flat, vertical, away from the camera, or towards it, and also in at least one other direction I'm not sure I'm smart enough to know the name for. Which means you have to work out the rotation you want, press rotate enough times, work out where in space your piece is in both directions, and where you want it to land, and get it to there. You have to do all this in the same time you normally have in Tetris just to rotate and drop. For me, it's at least one too many things. If you could disappear a simple line, you'd have a chance, but you need the entire horizontal plane, and of course once 3 pieces have dropped, there are now spaces you can no longer see, and probably don't even know if you've filled. Frack's a clever idea, and being implemented in this time period as an indie is impressive, but it doesn't work for me. There's a little too much going on, and it does not have Tetris's simplicity. I say implemented in this time period rather than implemented for free for a reason though. Apparently, if you play Frack more than twice, you should send them $10 for the shareware license. Fair enough, it's a perfectly valid software license, although you'd think it probably should have disqualified PD Magazine from leading with it, but the trouble they have is twice is about as many times as I wanted to play it. All of which means that our 3 free game face-off includes 2 games that at least in some circumstances cost money. Excellent work there. We still have to crown a winner, and it's not a coverdisk face-off without Gouldfish and his legendary podium, so let's hand over to the man himself to give us the results of his own free will.
There we have it, a very interesting magazine and collection of games, and it's time to rank them. In third, it is Frack for PC. The idea is solid, but the game is not playable easily in this form, and you spend the entire time wishing that you were playing a better version of the same basic idea. Second is Tennis for the ST. There's a polish here that gives away its roots, but as a single player experience, the slightly awkward controls will have you reaching for one of the 8 million better tennis games for the platform. And so our winner is Car for the Amiga. It's a simple idea, but implemented cleverly with really good playability. There's also a decent amount of content for you to mess around with, and also importantly, it's actually free. And as always, if you have anything to say about this ranking, then you can address it to Yesterzine in the comments. So until next time, I was the Gouldfish. That was what Dudley thought of those 3 games that I've never played, and this was Coverdisk Face Off.
I mentioned back when I was trying to unwind software licensing while putting as few of you into a coma as possible, that the title theme for Yesterzine is, and always has been, 12th Warrior by Bjorn Lynne, then part of the Amiga demo group The Crusaders, and writing under the "It was the late 1980s, okay" name of Dr. Awesome. I found this track hidden on the first CD cover disc I ever got and was an instant fan. The issue was covered right back in episode 27, Calibrate Your Review Sensors, which seems like an impossible amount of time ago now. You'll have encountered Bjorn's work elsewhere as a retro gamer, most notably being audio manager at Team 17 for 10 years, where he's most known for being the composer of almost all the music for the early Worms games, including the infamous Worms song, for which he provided the chorus vocals. Obviously, like almost any creative, he also did, and indeed does, his own stuff. In the late 90s, while still at Team 17, he wrote albums and sold both his original compositions and game soundtracks on CD through his own site. I own several of these, mostly signed. Weirdly, I'd not connected Bjorn with his previous incarnation at all. Or at least I hadn't until he announced the CD Revive, a collection of his early work, because the lead track on that is a rework of, well, if you haven't worked out that by now, we're all in trouble. But even if you do know about Bjorn, Dr. Awesome, or both of them, then you might not know he has another connection to the conceit of this show. He's also an ex-magazine editor. And because all things are connected, his former, or at this point future, employer is also very much connected in the pretzel-like knot that is looking into the connections of anyone ever involved in early computing. On page 29 is an advert for a PD library, 17-bit software, so called because of their claim to be 1 bit better than the rest. Founded by Michael Robinson, owner of the Microbyte chain of shops, and co-run at this point by Debbie Bestwick, one of his store managers, along with Martin Brown. They're one of the cheaper libraries, perhaps because they're also one of the bigger libraries. With a 50p surcharge for small orders, 17-bit will sell you PD discs for 89p each. The suspicious of you might have noticed the number 17 has appeared twice already in this feature, and therein lies the rest of the puzzle. About 9 months before this issue of Public Domain was published, 17-bit software had merged with Swedish developer Team 7 to form a new commercial software publisher, Team 17. They had already released their first game, Full Contact, which likely would have been forgotten if not for this place in history. If you're a long-time Yesterziner, then just telling you the average magazine review on Moby Games is 73% will take care of that. The credits are the giveaway. Programmed by Peter Toolby and Andreas Tadic. Art by Rico Holmes. All 3 of these were the main staff of Team 7, and they had worked on their only other commercial game, Miami Chase, for Codemasters. That game's music was by Alistair Brimble, who would also become indelibly linked with Team 17, being responsible for the themes from Assassin, Super Frog, Project X and Alien Breed, among others. The management credit is for Martin Brown. A look at this 17-bit advert reveals the same, especially if you look at their Scheme 17 section, where authors can get a small payout for discs sold. There's a sample disc from Alistair, a demo from The Crusaders, and a game by an MJ Brown, who, given Martin's middle name was James, I'm going to go ahead and assume is the same person. And there's AM/FM, the new disc mag for which they are the exclusive distributors, edited by Bjorn himself. The Amiga Musicians freeware magazine makes clear it is not PD, neatly confirming the first 10 minutes of this episode. It is indeed freeware. You are absolutely allowed to copy it, but you're not allowed to charge anything, even the admin fee for doing so, and thus the disc won't be appearing on the page of any of the other libraries. Bjorn's first editorial muses that there are magazines for all types of special interests, and yet there are no magazines for the computer musician. Of course, in 2025, most of those specialist magazines are long dead, but someone at Future Publishing must have been paying attention, because Future Music, covering music technology, was launched the next year, and ran for 414 issues before concluding in late 2024. AM/FM doesn't have a release schedule, saying they'll release issues when they have an issue to release. This makes sense, as most of the staff have other jobs in music. Alongside Bjorn, you have Teijo Kinnunen, who wrote Octamed. If there was a very niche episode of Family Fortunes and it asked, name a way of producing music on the Amiga, Octamed would absolutely be on the board. Con Wilms is now an AI engineer, so screw him. Espen Berenik Holm was already famous in Norway, by this point having released 6 albums. He's only done 3 since. Alistair Brimble we've literally already covered, but his speciality is listed as using as little memory as possible, which is something I've seen him talk about in interviews before. And finally, we have Tor Egil Brazeth, who still makes a living as a touring musician, mostly in his native Norway. It's a good staff lineup for a magazine which is clearly aimed at those who actually make music. Its main article is about the professional features of the Roland D70. This was a relatively new at the time synth that cost as much as most people's first cars. You'd need to be at least a semi-serious hobbyist to make use of the text, but if you were, it's gold. Possibly more universal is the tutorial for Octamed starting next issue, probably a freebie given the involvement of Teijo. But there's plenty of Amiga users who dicked around in Med at some point, including yours truly. Although the only thing I ever produced is a remix of the Zool title theme, which is thankfully lost to time. Possibly slightly dodgier is an uncredited review of Octamed, which mentions Teijo several times without reiterating his involvement with this magazine, and criticises only the existence of a comedy mouse pointer. Octamed has stood the test of time though, so the conclusion isn't wrong, it's just a little smelly. Teijo himself writes a strong tech column about serial and MIDI interfaces, and they also choose to highlight the new and exciting concept of 16-bit sampling on your 16-bit machine. Which tells me I know nothing about music, and these probably don't mean the same thing at all. There's also Tor Eagle's gossip column, which seems to be all about new Roland products, and disappointingly doesn't tell me anything about who is having an affair with Alan Sugar, or what form of psychological treatment they might need afterwards. There is at least some interest for the layman here. There's a few tunes on the disc, including the background music by David Elstrom, and also one by Bjorn Lynne with a nice horror theme that will absolutely suit the month this episode is live. It's difficult to know how long AM/FM ran, but it's probably 19 issues, by which point they've already started selling the CDs of Bjorn's solo work I mentioned a few minutes ago. It does continue the trend of the magazine staff checking each other's homework with a review of Bjorn's own album Montage, along with, for some reason, Pink Floyd and Yes. The editorial of 1994's issue 19 promises an issue 20, but then it also apologises for the time since the last one, and that's always the sign of a free project that's about to be abandoned, especially as the world is moving on. Bjorn himself admitting he now owns a PC as well as his beloved Amiga. Still though, I love a project like this. They were about to be subsumed by the internet, and I guess ultimately by YouTube. But these time capsules of magazines within magazines being produced and distributed for funsies are the spirit of human creativity which continues today in all those forms, including this show, for which I can only profoundly apologise. On the back page, Public Domain Magazine, because if you're interested in everything we've talked about today, if you've seen the disc from all 6 issues on archive.org and are annoyed it has been lost to the public for the last 30 years, then worry not. Ashens has indeed scanned all of them. He's OCR'd all of them. And even better, there are not only 6 issues, there's 9, but it dropped the disc after issue 6, which appears to have fooled most of the internet. But the best news of all is, if the spirit of cooperation and internet connections have held up for us, on the very day this video goes live, so do the scans of all 9 issues on the Internet Archive. So thank you to Stuart, and you should all go download those beautifully scanned tomes and enjoy considerably more software than there could possibly have been room for in a single episode of this show. Thanks also to Rob Smith for his incredible breakdown on how the disc works, which you should go and watch in full along with all the other batshittery he does. Thanks to Gouldfish for his sense of humour in me piggybacking his video series where he looks at cover discs from every Amiga magazine in a given month. You should also go watch that, which now covers virtually the entire viable life of the Amiga. And thanks also to Cogweasel, whose bank holiday research really tied the ends together on the tennis issue. You'll find him being adorably angry at both ST and Spectrum games on Gears of Games. And if you somehow found me before Ashens, the man was doing YouTube before YouTube was, so just go sub. Watch all of that and you might be done in time for the next issue of Yesterzine on the last Friday in October, where we will be attempting to rehabilitate the worst machine and genre combination this show has ever seen. And if you like this episode, send $10. Not to me, I don't need it, but to someone. Good night.